Hello and welcome to Mind Gourmet. My name is Nina Kaiser. I'm the co-founder of Mind Gourmet and, as always, your host today. My today's guest is award-winning thought leader, professional speaker, and author of Spiritual Atheist, a quest to unite science and wisdom into a radical new life philosophy to thrive in the digital age, Nick Jankel. Hi, Nick. Welcome.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here.
I'm so happy we get to spend this time together. And before we dive into our conversation, I'm introducing you a little to our audience. Nick Seneca Jankel is an award-winning thought leader, author, and professional speaker. He has advised organizations like Number 10 Downing Street, Kellogg's, HSBC, Microsoft, and World Wildlife Fund. He has been invited to speak at the prestigious Aspen Ideas Festival, TEDx, and Google headquarters. A former allied scientist and medic, Nick brings the latest science into his work, cognitive, behavioral, emotional, interceptive, and blends it with timeless wisdom and uber-practical tools for change. He has spent 30 years developing an advanced brain-based transformational methodology, the switch-on way, which provides a rigorous and proven pathway for unleashing transformation in any areas of leadership or life. It provides individuals and leaders with 90-plus powerful tools and practices to master themselves. He's a highly accomplished international keynote speaker who has spoken all over the world to audiences at Lego, SAP, Google, Kellogg's, Smuckers, Fujitsu, the Economist Summit, amongst many others. A broadcaster, Nick hosted his own BBC TV show, has been featured in the Financial Times and the Sunday Times, and has taught on the MBA programs of LBS, Oxford, UCL, and Yale. He has been on the BBC World Service, CBS, and Hay House Radio. Nick obtained a triple first-class degree, summa cum laude, in medicine and philosophy from Cambridge University, and is the author of a number of books on creativity and leadership. So, I would like to open our conversation with a quote from the foreword of Spiritual Atheist, and it says, "I had pretty much everything that I thought was important. My own home, success with the startup I had co-founded, launching new products like Microsoft's Xbox, and developing new innovations like the most successful TV show of all time. And on paper, I was a multi-millionaire. But it all came crashing down around the time of my 30th birthday. I burned out and had a breakdown. My love life, business, physical well-being, and mental health all imploded." Nick, would you summarize for us what actually led you to this point and how did you continue your life afterwards?
So this was a transformational moment in my life, definitely. And I think all moments like this where we have some kind of meltdown are opportunities to reconstitute ourselves. And in fact, in the transformational pathway that I teach, we get a choice between whether we proactively sort of unintegrate our life, our habits and thoughts and feelings, work on them and then put them back together. That's the proactive, what I would call preventative wisdom. Mm-hmm. Or our life and the universe does that for us with what we would call a breakdown or meltdown or crisis or spiritual emergency. So at this stage in my life, I didn't know that fully. So this was the last great sort of breakdown of my life that was done to me or felt like it was done to me, rather than me proactively going, okay, something needs to change inside me and doing it for myself, leading it for myself. So that's to say that this kind of meltdown process is, I believe, absolutely natural. It's the way transformation has to occur. The simplest way I can put it is the way I teach my kids, which is you've got a lovely Lego, you've built this beautiful Lego construction, but then you decide you want to build something new. So you have to decide whether you want to break apart the old Lego construction, which feels painful for a few minutes or can feel painful.
Yeah.
to build the new thing, or stick with what you've got and then be frustrated that you didn't have the new thing you wanted. So that's kind of the simplest metaphor of this. So personally, and my book talks much more detail about how what led to this point. And for me, the reason why I wrote this book as what I call a philosophical memoir is not that I love talking about my own personal journey, but because my personal journey feels like a metaphor, or what would be the word, sort of like an analogy, or for, I think, the way the world is developing. So I had built a life that was at the pinnacle of, let's call it, liberal, progressive, entrepreneurial, rational life, which is very much like where we are in society. We're at the pinnacle of science, reason, money, venture capital, investing in startups which create unicorns, billion-dollar businesses, which then exit and create wealth and status. So I had wealth and status, the two things that you get in this sort of meritocratic, progressive age if you're smart and if you work hard. And what I discovered, which was really the crux of this book and this life philosophy, is that that's not enough for a full life. It feels like it should be enough. And that was kind of like the rude awakening for me, which is I've got everything that the material world seems to think is available to you. I've done what was expected of me, although I don't think I ever was told to do this life journey. But somehow I must have picked up some sense of the American dream, the European dream, whatever you call it, the liberal progressive dream, which is to build your own life from your own talents, a sort of meritocratic life. And yet I was still miserable, and my relationships weren't working, and I wasn't able to manage my team very well, and they didn't like me very much. I didn't like me very much. It was really the biggest issue. And so that was the pivot point of everything that came after. And that was where I was given the choice, which was, keep going on this path, and this will happen again, or make sure it doesn't. And that's what took me. That was what we call in systems, complex systems theory, is a bifurcation point. So my path bifurcated. You'll know this from the idea of sliding doors as a movie. The sliding doors moment is our pathways bifurcate. And in complex systems theory, one path goes up to a higher degree of order and complexity and elegance and harmony, and one path goes down to a less higher order. And each moment really of our life is one of these, but particularly these big moments. Do I go for the promotion and carry on in this company, or do I start my own enterprise? Do I get engaged in this moment where my partner's asking me to get married, even though I know it's not really the relationship that's for me? These are all the big bifurcation moments. And no one teaches us this.
No.
Cool. So one of the things I often say in my keynotes, and I do keynotes, for very senior executives of very large organizations, lawyers, doctors, CEOs, that kind of stuff, as well as for the rest of us, we could call it. And what I say to people is, listen, at the age of 30, I looked back and I realized that no one had given me more than, I would say, an hour, optimistically, of education about how to understand myself and run my own experience of life. Out of, tens of thousands of hours of an elite education, private school in London, Cambridge University, top 5 global ad agency. And I had not even 60 minutes of understanding of my biology and my experience. And so that was the moment where I go, okay, I can't do this again. I need to do something. I can't come back to this point of feeling so wretched. And that was the big bifurcation point. There have been others in my life. Leaving medical school was another big one, which was a very difficult thing to do, because once you're in that sort of path, people expect you to think that's the most elite path on the planet, and why would you possibly want to leave it? And they didn't want me to leave it. And so it was and you know, my family was like, wow, what are you doing leaving Cambridge Medical School? You know, when you're a first class student, this is insanity. So these moments are really important. Letting go. One of the great lessons of my life is you have to let go of what's kind of working in order to have something that really, really works. And that's extraordinarily painful to us as human beings.
Yeah, it's extraordinarily painful. And in also my experience, often extraordinarily scary, because basically we decide to go into the unknown, and the unknown always seems to be promising, but even more scary. And what you just shared before, I think is a big part in all of this too, that we are relational beings and we react to the expectations of others, especially to the people we love and treasure, like our parents and our best friends, and to make decisions that feel like right to the core and soul of us, but not right to the people we love, is often a big thing, at least in my experience.
Oh, absolutely. And in fact, biologically, two really important points, which I often teach people. One, emotional pain, social pain, hurts in the same part of the brain and with the same intensity as physical pain. So that look from your father when he goes, oh, you're going to do a meditation course or whatever it is, you know, that actually hurts in the same place as physical pain.
Wow, okay.
And secondly, when we feel the world is complex, uncertainty hurts in the same part of the brain as physical pain. We actually don't like uncertainty. There's a research piece that came out that rats, which have quite a similar neurobiology to us, they would rather have certain electric shocks than uncertain, not knowing if there's going to be one or not.
Ooh.
So my take of that is we'd rather experience predictable pain, like my relationship sucks, my job sucks, my parents suck, my friends suck, but I'm just going to, at least it's predictable. I know this about my life, rather than have the risk of something we don't know, maybe better, maybe not, etc. And so our biology is geared towards saying, whoa, don't start being creative and risk-taking and whatever. And actually, Jeff Bezos of Amazon says it really well, which is in order to do disruptive innovation, and you could take that to be a business innovation or your own disruptive innovation in your life, like a totally different career from all your friends and family. You have to be willing to be misunderstood for a very long time. And that hurts. As you say, we're social beings. Yeah. We have a relational field between every person in our life. And if they don't understand us, we have to have a huge inner resource to be able to carry on. Or we find ourselves going back into the expectations of others.
Absolutely. And since one thing also we don't learn is how to navigate life based on our intuition, our inner GPS, and to have like what I would maybe call a vibration management. There's so much confusion about all this. And I would like to go into the topic of distinguishing between intuition and maybe a fear-based gut feeling a little later. But the next thing I actually wanted to ask you is about the topic, the title of your book, Spiritual Atheism. And I just told it to you before we started. I loved reading your book and I collected paragraphs that I find very meaningful. And I would like to read the next one to you. And it says, spiritual atheism, which on a first glance might sound like a contradiction in itself, is a very powerful concept. So, and further on in your book, you say, I have found that the life-changing mystical experience of enlightenment, and with it an abiding sense that we are all connected and loved, which has perhaps unfortunately come to be labeled spirituality, can fit perfectly well with the love of science and data. So can you go a little more into what is spiritual atheism with us?
And that's the crux of the whole thing, really. So there's a lot to unpack in that. So one of the things I think has happened in the last 30 or 40 years from the 60s, mainly, but also if you go further back to the original spiritual movements in Europe, the Theosophists and whatever, is I think so one of the issues that's happened is there's been a conflation between what I would call an aesthetic, a new age aesthetic. So that means what you traditionally would consider to be spiritual today, most people. So that means lotus flower images, alternative clothing, you know, the smell of incense, that whole thing, which by the way, I was never into. So it was that whole area was just like a no to me. And what I now know spirituality to be, which is this experience of unity, of oneness, which I believe we human beings can't describe that very easily. So we usually describe it as love. Truth sometimes as well, you know, it's a full experience. It's very hard to packet it up, but you know, love and truth is a good kind of summary for now. And so what's happened, I believe, is people have said, well, to be spiritual, I have to be countercultural, which for me makes no sense because it means against the culture that you're part of. And I'm for the culture. I want my culture to transform. I want my culture to upgrade. You have to pull out of the mainstream world, have an alternative career. And also you probably have to believe in some kind of conspiracy of some sort. And that means probably not thinking science is very useful or very good. But for me, that's not spirituality. That's a new age aesthetic, which I have no truck with. I have no problem with. It's just not personally good for what I wanted in my life. So it's very personal. So that's become what people call spiritual. And then people, a lot of my friends who are, you know, graduates of top universities, they're scientists, they're in government, they're in big companies. They're just like, well, I'll just get rid of all, I don't want any of that stuff. And that's what I was like. So until I was about 30, 31, I was just a big rejecting no to everything that I thought smacked of this new age woo-woo stuff. And yet, of course, what was the experience I was missing most in my life was the core of all that, which is spiritual enlightenment, this experience, the mystical experience. I prefer the term mystical to spiritual in some ways. But then mystical has also been caught up in sort of the occult and druids and whatever. So they're both, the words are very tarnished in the enlightened, and I mean Western enlightened discourse, reasonable discourse. So that's where I got to the book, was like, okay, so most people think if you're spiritual, you can't be atheist. And most people think if you're an atheist, you can't be spiritual. And I wanted to take that massive error, which I believe is at the heart of not just our own personal challenges, but at the heart of a system which is failing. In every area of the system, it's failing. Education is failing, health is failing, politics is failing, because we have cut out the mystical love experience out of our rational scientific understanding of life. And now we have just this split. And it's like a split personality, or it's this kind of schism in our psyche and a schism in our society. And I wanted to say with this book, we've got to put it together. We've got to. That's the most important thing. And I mean that on a very personal level, first of all. You've got to bring them together in ourselves, which is challenging. I mean, I'm not saying it's not a challenging path, but I believe it's the only path that's going to get us out of the challenges we're in with this crazy world. And I guess that's the book originally was going to be titled The Atheism Breakthrough, which is slightly more targeted at the kind of the atheist, science lover, rational, data loving person. And I was saying, but there's you need a breakthrough with atheism. But I kind of toyed with this idea of this bringing two seemingly opposite things together, which for me is a big part of wisdom, is being able to hold things that seem to be opposites and raise your level of awareness and consciousness so that they actually are no longer opposite. And so the book was a kind of holding together of those two things. It kind of works for some. It's been very interesting. It's been very polarizing. And I've been in different conversations that I've been surprised by the reaction that people have had.
Ooh. Well, I I think the polarizing thing or the seeming contradiction is actually that what is really interesting about it. And you mentioned something that I see so often for myself too, and that is language is a beautiful thing, but it's also a big limitations because we put things into concepts and boxes and we put names on it, like spirituality isn't necessarily just say a vibration or an energy. It gets a concept that is going to be described, like how you have to dress, and suddenly there are rules and so on.
Yes.
And I like, because you were actually speaking about language in your book, and you said it is important to remember that all words and concepts, no matter how useful or specific, are there to guide us to experience this oneness, this non-duality for ourselves. But they are not the truth in themselves. They are just words. Language separates us from what it is describing as much as it connects us. It bewitches us as much as it liberates. And I had to read this because it just resonates so much with you. And would you go a little more into the phenomenon of language and what it does for, and sometimes seemingly also like against us in a divisive way?
I mean, language is an amazing thing, right? Without language, we wouldn't be here as a species. I wouldn't be here with you. But we have to remember that language is always an abstraction from the actual lived experience of something. So a caveman or woman who has no language still can experience connection, love, oneness, truth, and in some ways maybe has a simpler and happier life. I don't know. It's a speculation we could entertain, because they don't talk about it. And not just that, they don't create a story about why their life is not as good as they wanted it to be. And stories are always in words, right? So as soon as we have words, you get story, and story is amazing. I mean, I teach storytelling for leaders and entrepreneurs because it's an essential understanding of our own self-story, and then how we get other people to change by giving them a bigger story and a bigger role in a bigger story. So story and language are essential to transmission of wisdom, of ideas, of how to stay alive, how to be loved, how to love. Because being human can be very complex. So we need a lot of help and a lot of discernment. And that, when I say the word connection to people, and then they understand what I mean by that concept, they can then start guiding their life from a different place. That's the strength of language. But we have a part of us, which I call a mode. I call it 2 different modes in the book, and it's in all my work. There's a part of us called control and protect mode, which does what it says on the tin. It's there to control the world and make the world simpler and predictable, and also to protect us, therefore, from danger and whatever. And this mode will then hijack language. And it will then make it will reify the language. It will make the language the God. And that's what philosophers do when they call everything an ism, or in German, ismus. Yep. And when I was being taught philosophy, I had no idea what they were talking about most of the time, because they weren't unpacking the concepts. Mm-hmm. They were just saying idealism, materialism, scientism, all these, and I got lost. And so this book is a philosophy book, but I purposefully, with all my work, attempt to unpack what we really mean, and then give people the label so that they can then read other books with a better map. Because the map, I was never given a map by anyone, so I had to find my own map. And that's really, really the deeper, I guess, gift I'm hopefully giving with my books is a better map, and a map for everybody rather than a map just for the elite. And so these concepts then become more important than the feelings we have. And then it becomes a kind of a fight between logos and logos. Or rather, I would say between control and protect mode and someone else's control and protect mode. So I'm actually just writing a blog, an article about this with what people call the intellectual dark web, which is this new group of philosophers out there like Jordan Peterson and others of that ilk, because I can see the way they write, the way they trained is they move quickly into essentially winning through words, through the logos, through logic, through reason. And as soon as you've won an argument with words, you've lost, because you've lost the connection, and you've lost the empathy, and you've lost the being togetherness, the interbeing that is so important. And so I can use words like I am now, I hope, in what I call create and connect mode, where I'm using words to present something in you, the viewer, listener, a reader, rather than to win and to show how brilliant I am, which, by the way, is very tempting when you write books, because part of my control and protect mode wants to hijack my role as a teacher and practical philosopher to be then loved by the academic philosophers that I don't have respect from, quite frankly, because I'm not in academia. I don't teach permanently at Yale and Oxford and Cambridge and all these places. So that's the challenge and the joy of words, is that they allow us to teach and to bring people into awareness. But the most important thing is the felt sense. And so, for example, my wife is not an academic. She's not intellectual as a whole. She loves reading my books because they give her frameworks for what she already knows, feels. But she's an embodied teacher. She's an embodiment teacher. She's a craniosacral therapist. She's a dance teacher, choreographer. So she feels all this stuff. And whilst it's helpful to her to have words to then teach to others, because it's very hard just to go, oh, just feel in that, this bit here, just feel, that's really hard to do. So words are really helpful to bring people. But if you don't feel it in your own biology, in your own body and mind, in your heart and soul and guts, then you don't have it. And I know a lot of people who teach some kind of spiritual teachings, but I can tell immediately when I first meet them or put in touch with them that their heart isn't open. They're not feeling the heart opening experience. They're talking about it. They know it's important. And for me, with all my work, spiritual atheism, right? So within spiritual atheism is the idea that you have feeling and thought. Again, and so for me, it's really important to be able to speak, but keep my feeling layer as attended to as my words in this experience right now. And that's really challenging to do because we're not taught how to do that.
That's true. And it's in my perception is often like we are vibrational beings in a physical universe, and we need to a certain degree language to communicate. But as you say, actually it only works as long as our hearts are open and we radiate the openness to connect. And another phenomenon that I find very interesting is that when you start speaking a foreign language, like now I speak in English and not my native language, concepts and words suddenly receive a different feel to it. For example, the German translation for spirituality or divinity or religion in my upbringing feels like contracted, it feels unpleasant. But when I use the same words in English that I have learned later on, maybe, I don't know if that's the reason, or if maybe English is just a different way of expressing, it has a totally different feel. And I don't know why that is, but when I speak about certain topics, I feel way more at home when I speak English. And
I understand fully. So I mean, the word spirituality has been a great challenging word for me for 15 years.
Yeah. And there's another big word, and that's the one I want to go to now, because I am so fascinated by it, and it's so elusive. And still, if we're really within ourselves, we actually know what it is, but we can't say it, and that is consciousness. And you say in your book, consciousness of which there is no agreed on definition is darn tricky to study scientifically, because the scientific project was never conceived to answer questions about our consciousness, like how to have a life of meaning and to be happy. So what's your personal take on what consciousness is?
Well, people often ask me as a writer, should I write a book? They ask me, I've got a book, I want to write a book. And I often say there's only two good reasons to write a book. One is for business reasons, as a what people would call a dynamic business card. And the other is so that you can develop yourself and what you mean by things in a live process as you write. And that's what happens to me. So I've written two big books, about to start a third. And they are really very transformational experiences for me, because I it weaves together within me what I mean and what I think. And so this book also, before I wrote this book, I would never really use the word consciousness very much. And particularly in that, the sort of way that the contemporary spiritual scene puts conscious in front of everything to signal something, but I don't always know what they're trying to signal. You know, what's a conscious microphone? What's a conscious podcast? What does it mean? So I never really knew what this word conscious something means. I think now I have a much clearer understanding of what I mean by the word consciousness, having wrote this book. And actually, it's still, even since after writing the book and writing some articles about it and being interviewed about it, it's pulled even more understanding from me about what I mean. So I guess the summary is, I believe consciousness is a word that, first of all, it's a word that used very differently in different circles. So a scientist would mean something different. A scientist who studies consciousness through fMRI scanners would probably mean something very different from someone like Deepak Chopra, but that's another conversation. So what I mean by consciousness is the entirety of our interior experience of being, which for me is always sort of distinguishable in three different areas, maybe four. So I call it heart, head, hand. So it's heart would be emotional experiences in the moment. Head is our beliefs, stories, assumptions, language about it. And our hands are our sort of behavioral sense of, are we pushing, are we moving, are we dancing, are we protecting? And then there's a fourth layer, which I would call the felt sense, like the kind of very visceral, what you might call the vibrational layer. So that's always happening in consciousness. And with human consciousness, we get this sense of self-awareness. We get the sense of being in the world. We get the sense of world. We get the sense of other. And my ultimate belief is that the scientific tradition, it's not even a belief. If you go back and look at Galileo's own words, which I do in the book, and there were others after him, who basically said, this thing called consciousness, this thing that we experience, smells, tastes, colors, sense of happiness, sense of well-being, sense of purpose. You're always ever relying on someone's self-reporting of where they're at inside. And therefore it's not really accurate. It's not hard data. You can't really measure it. You can say, well, today I'm 6 out of 10 for flourishing, and tomorrow I'm 9 out of 10. But that's not really scientific in the sense that we need the data that we have with physical or chemical or biological systems. And so Galileo was the first one to say, you know what? Okay, how about this? Let's just not study that stuff, because it doesn't really allow us to do measurements and then look at what's changed in the measurement. And anyway, like the detail we need to do what I think this thing called science is, which I'm really loving, by the way, because it's not religion and it's really certain. So let's just discount consciousness. I don't think he was meaning it doesn't exist. Mm-hmm. Just saying we can't study it in the way we study physical and material systems. So let's just put it to one side. And then subsequent philosophers and scientists have just pushed it even further aside and further aside. And now it's become this weird thing in the corner, rather than what I believe, which is half of everything in life. It's 50% of everything. And every moment there's some material, there's this material stuff here, and there's my interior experience of it. And that's where this divorced split psyche comes from, is that we think consciousness is something different from matter. And you get the mind-body problem, you get the hard problem of consciousness, you get the placebo effect, confusions. And actually, if you realize that every physical material thing must have some interiority in it, like the internal version of it all the time, whether it's a stone, probably not self-aware, I'd imagine, but it must have some capacity for interior consciousness. Otherwise, we have to explain how a wet, warm brain has all this amazing, rich experience inside. And that has become impossible for philosophers who don't have what I call in the book a dual aspect metaphysics. So two aspects of one reality. And we're so used to splitting them apart that we often fall into the same trap of going, well, there's consciousness and there's matter, and they're different. And they're not different. They're different in experience, definitely. but they have to only be one reality, because the whole point of the mystical experience is you realize there's only one reality. And as soon as you just put two realities, you get into dualism. And that's been just a nightmare for the human condition, has been this understanding of separation between mind and body. And we're still stuck in it, honestly. Right now, I'm working on a whole bit of thinking around productivity versus being present with each other, and how we're so geared to make every minute productive. I'm going to do a podcast, and I'm going to write my to-do list. And even I had a kind of meltdown with my wife, not a big one, I hasten to add. About 4 weeks ago, we were in Greece, and I was on a beach, and I just started crying on her legs. And I realized I was grieving for all this time. I'm always trying to gear everything to be productive. I'm an entrepreneur, I write my own books, etc. And even with my kids, I try and make the 20 minutes with them productive. Like, we're going to build something. We're going to make a cake. We're going to do Lego. Because I'm so used to making everything materially productive that I sometimes forget to make the consciousness piece just present. And that's how deranged I am. I get pulled all into the matter as any matter important, even though I teach a balanced, harmonious tension between the two.
I so experienced the same thing. And from my not conscious, but like momentary, my state of awareness that I have in this moment, often it feels like I use these things to distract myself from what's really going on. So busyness, it gets more and more clear to me, can be a big thing not to look at your own stuff. And on the other side, I kind of get that there need things to be done. And I guess it's a little like the thing with language or consciousness and matter as seemingly two different things. Then you get caught up in this dualism between being and doing, which essentially, in some way, I guess, is also just the same thing looked at from different angles. And that brings me to how you describe the symbol on your book, which in German we would say the Möbius strip.
Yes.
How do you say it in English?
Same German word. We like to use the original. So yeah, Möbius. And
you say you will see. Oh, I see the book in your background, and I just have the digital version. Can you show it quickly?
I can hold it up to people so you can see.
Yeah, exactly.
Hold on. Let me get it better.
So
that is a Möbius strip, which is a mathematical conundrum or paradox.
Yeah, and you say in your book, you will see that although there are two clear sides, consciousness and matter, there's actually only one side, since your finger can keep on going without interruption. Each side is forever connected, forever one, although they are seemingly separate. There's only one strip, one universe. But there is also a very real illusion that there are two separate sides. Both of the sides count. And I just had to write this down because maybe my mind doesn't fully grasp it, but I feel that this is such a brilliant way to describe it. So can you maybe give a little more words to that?
I mean, I don't think my mind understands it. And that's part of this dual aspect metaphysics, is my mind has a little bit of understanding of it, and then my heart gets it fully, and I have to live both of those in the moment. And as soon as we go into this false dualism between like doing and being, I'm just going to be for a moment. I'm going to meditate. I'm going to be. Oh, no, I've got to do some stuff. It's like no. There's always being and always doing, or every moment. But sometimes we might want to prioritize one aspect of us to really get something done. Like, I'm going to get on my to-do list. I'm going to do 2 hours and I'm going to get stuff done. I'm still being in it. I'm still fully being. And now I'm going to spend more time being present with my wife for 20 minutes. I'm just going to listen to her without trying to solve her problems or fix her or get anything done. So you're right. As soon as there's a dualism, we lose. So this Möbius strip image here is a very real thing. In fact, I'm going to grab a bit of paper. And I'm going to do it. Hold on. There you go. Okay. So here we go. This is one bit of paper. Imagine this is your mind and body or the universe as a whole, because as above, so below. It's only one bit of paper. We're all clear on that, right?
Yes.
But at the moment, it seems to have this side, which is not connected to what's on this side. So you have a side here with some color, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And let's imagine that's consciousness, rich experiences of, looks like Christmas baubles. And then we have this material side, which is the physical neurons, which are firing at the same time as we experience stuff. And so what the Mobius strip does, which is so beautiful, is you connect the two sides together. So there's only one, so it's a loop. But just before you do that, you just twist it. And that's a Mobius strip here. What makes it so interesting as a metaphor that could be actually really what's going on, but it's a metaphor for, I believe, how we have to structure our understanding of the world, which is still got consciousness. I'm still feeling stuff. But if I continue around the conscious aspect, suddenly I find myself now in the material aspect of neurons, and then I'm back into consciousness again, and now I'm back into the material. So in fact, we've gone from having two sides of one bit of paper to only one side. This has only got one side. It's a total paradox for the mind. How can a piece of paper have two sides, but now it's only got one side? But it always only had, it's only one bit of paper, one universe, non-dual reality. So that's why the book became, that's why that became the symbol on the book. And my kids also see it as an infinity symbol, which is a helpful additional metaphor, because it seems to encapsulate this reality which I've experienced, which is we are one, but we also split into dual aspects, dual experiences. And one of the things I've learned about this book is, and other books I've written, once I've developed the concept, they then create more fertile insights in other areas. So I've just applied this thinking to this identity politics thing, which is going on in the world, social justice warriors, rights and responsibilities, and being politically correct and whatever. And it's been extremely fertile. Likewise, in economics, trying to understand productivity versus presence has been really fertile. So that for me is a sign that there's something very useful in this concept, which is still a concept. But it's helped me a lot trying to understand very difficult things that I didn't have a lens to look through.
Yeah, and speaking of concepts that in some way also belong to our yearning to feel whole in some way, there is this concept of purpose. I don't know if it's just a word that seems now, so I'm fashionable is a little mean, and I don't mean it in a mean way, but everybody speaks about purpose, and I think it comes from this yearning of really being whole and being one. And you say in Spiritual Atheist, simply purpose is love in action. It's the experience of connection turned into creative acts that genuinely help others to become free and flourish more. And so I would like to go a little deeper in here. So what is purpose for you?
Well, actually, the way you just introduced it helped me understand more about what I mean. That's what I mean. Things are always evolving and expanding in my understanding. So for me, purpose is popular because it's become a concept that bridges interior consciousness with exterior material action. So in its very nature, it's bridging the dualities. And that's why I think people like it. Because purpose is, for me, a one-word way of saying we have this unlimited sense of or limitless infinitive love and passion and adoration for the world within us that is being channeled through our particular channel, like a lens. Purpose is bringing our light onto a very specific social, environmental, community problem. And so in one word of P-U-R-P-O-S, 7 letters, we bring together this sense of full wholeness inside consciousness, quite a developed consciousness, a cultivated consciousness that's aware of its love for others. and it's now in action doing stuff in the world, because purpose doesn't have, what I love about purpose is, purpose has some moving towards something in the world.
Yes.
And that's what people like. It's like, oh, it's practical. It's like doing something. Yes, but it's also being something.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have in one word this sense, which I don't think is very well understood, by the way, people who call themselves purpose-driven, is because I don't think people are as aware that it's not just a mission, a social mission. It will probably include a social mission, but it's love wanting to come out and touch suffering in the world in a very practical way. And that's why I think it's becoming, as you could say, a voguish term.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And it makes totally sense. And I don't know if that matches actually exactly what you said, but what it like made me think was that purpose seems to be a word that almost bridges being and doing.
Yes, absolutely. That's exactly what I mean.
It gives comfort, and it gives a certain sense of direction.
It does.
No, maybe direction is wrong, but a feeling of you might go here, there.
No, I think direction's right. I was actually going to use the word dative, which is a term that, apologies, there's a phone going on in the office. I use the term, I'm just going to wait for that to stop so I can be clear. Okay. So I was going to use the term dative, which is a grammatical term meaning words like to and towards. Right. I think that's actually a very important part of purpose, is it has a movement in it towards. So purpose alone without the love and connection inside becomes a sort of radicalist, rebellious desire to create change. Like that, what we might see with the Soviet system or communist revolution or Maoist revolution. It's trying to change. It's all movement towards, but it doesn't come from this big heartfelt sense of peace and love with what is. And so that's why I do distinguish with people between purpose and mission. Mm-hmm. And what I love about purpose as well is that when you come into a boardroom of a company, purpose is a backdoor for bringing mysticism, and I mean the best kind of mysticism, love. It's a backdoor for bringing that experience into a business or an organization that has no way of bringing it in other than maybe a well-being mindfulness course somewhere down the bottom of the heap for sort of stressed out people. It's a way of bringing love into the top table of an organization. And that's quite a powerful concept, which really hasn't done much yet. So we're in the very beginnings of a purpose revolution, if there is actually one. But and that's why it's such a powerful term, because it's now the CEO talks about it. We want a purpose. They don't know what it means. They don't know how to get one, but they know they want one. And they know it's going to inspire people and keep staff to stay longer and work harder and all that stuff. But what they do is that they don't realize that to get it, they have to listen in to consciousness. And that's obviously the next step.
Yeah, and it feels, I don't know for everybody, but it seems purpose is a word that you can feel good with. It has
exactly.
It has this, this encouraging, I don't really find the right words, but it feels good. And I want to stay with feeling, because before we talked a little bit about connectiveness and divisiveness of language, and also that sometimes it's hard to distinguish actually when we try to navigate our lives from the inside out, what actually is coming from true love and intuition, and what might be some kind of a fear-based instinctive behavior. And in your book, you say, by refining our capacity to discern love-fueled intuition from fear-driven instinct, we get clarity on how to make more purposeful choices. And I think this is such an important point, because I guess most of us want to make more purposeful choices, but we don't exactly know often what to rely on with regards to what we feel about things.
Mm.
And so my question for you is how do you distinguish between these two things that can appear, especially when it comes to saying no to something very similar?
Yes. It's one of the great journeys of life. And it's the kind of moment by moment challenge of a spiritual atheist path. So a spiritual atheist has two sets of information to encounter, to make choices. One is data from the material world. That could be sense data coming into our eyes and smell, but more and more it's figures, it's spreadsheets, it's podcast downloads, it's watches on my video, it's did I make any money with that book? You know, that's the data we're making decisions with. That's one stream coming in. And then there's this other stream from within our body, coming up from our guts, through our vagus nerve, through our heart, nerves, that's coming up into our brain, sometimes down from our brain. And then we have this internal sense. And then we have to make a choice. And 20 times a day, 30 times a day. Do I send that email? Do I get rid of that on my to-do list? Do I take the afternoon off? These are all the choices, the micro choices.
All the time.
So then so that's the kind of the choices we have to make. So the data is actually quite easy to understand, you know, usually quite good, but you can clean it up. Fine, great, got that information. Now I've got to try and marry that external knowledge from the material world with my inner consciousness. And this is where it gets really tricky, because our inner consciousness itself has this dual aspect reality, which I've intimated, between this control and protect mode, which we can call it the protector energy or the protector function inside. And then we have this create and connect mode with the connector function inside. And so one of the ways I describe that, not in the boardroom, I should add, in the personal development space, is we can ask the protector inside us what to do, and we can ask the connector inside us what to do. So the protector, as you can understand, it talks in a very urgent, save us from fear and pain and suffering way. So it will say no to a lot of things, which could be really good things. It will just go, no, no, risky, no. But it also say yes to things like more video games. Yeah. Dopamine, you know, stuff, sex, chocolate, someone giving us a promotion, even though it might be actually not in alignment with our deepest purpose. It's a pleasure seeker and a pain avoider.
Yeah. And
it speaks in a very loud way, urgent. But then we have this other sense, this connector, which speaks in intuition, which speaks very quietly, very, very calm, but very insistent, very powerful. And so the difficulty with life can be that we have this choice to make, and some of them are big, some of them are small. Where we're going to live, the course we're going to do at university, whether to go on a date, second date. And we have to find a way to listen. Am I listening to my protector very loud going, no, or yeah? Or is there a deeper knowing within me which is going, yes, definitely this. But we can't hear it because our inner consciousness is so coarse, it's not cultivated, that we have all this noise going on and it's very hard to listen. So one of the very important roles of any form of meditative practice or wisdom practice, whether you like to get ecstatic and go blah, or whether you like to go very quiet, is to try and discern this instinct, this loud gut feel instinct with this quiet, let's say not gut, but sort of visceral feel. It's much bigger than gut, I think. Sort of, I'm sure it's different in everyone, but for me, it's kind of here, which is this quiet sense of what to do next. And often it doesn't have anything to do different. That's what I've discovered. It's just going, yep, carry on. Particularly when you're in a purpose-driven path like I am. So I've been doing almost 15 years of explicitly entrepreneurial work around love, purpose, connection. And often it doesn't have a great thing to say other than, yep, just keep going, you know. And whereas my protector's like going, I want faster things to happen and more, bigger uplift. So with this book, for example, it came through me. This was a very intuitive book to write. I wrote all the chapter heads in 2 hours. And I was writing another book at the time. I didn't want to write this book. It doesn't fit really with my strategy. that my protector has developed for growth and stuff. It just came through me. And then my protector hijacks it going, maybe this is my breakthrough book. And I'm going to get on the Oprah's couch and have the, you know, and so there's always this loudness, wanting things to be bigger and quicker and faster. And often my connector just says, yep, carry on as you're doing. Maybe do less of that stuff. It's not well helpful. Focus a bit more. And that's it. There is no great big fireworks. And I think we're so used to fireworks because the dopamine system, the protector system, whether it's through drugs or through partying or through excitement of tech entrepreneurship and venture capital, we got round B, oh my God, it's so loud, it's so intense. And this much deeper system is just less intense. So we're like, is anything happening here? Do I have any intuition? So yeah, it's just not very sexy a lot of the time.
Yeah, and it really seems to require our full unconditional awareness.
Mm. And that's the rub.
Yeah.
Because we're not used to it. And look, I mean, I'm doing this for a long time, and there are days where I just feel that I need to stop for today. Go for a walk on the hills, watch a Netflix show, just to refuel and recharge. And I find it almost excruciating sometimes because it's not productive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I literally have a to-do list of you know, epic proportions. We're building a school based around these principles. Ooh. We're looking at doing this kind of work with politicians in Europe, senior politicians. I'm building another business with another person for young leaders on sustainable innovation. I've got an app that I think could deliver this work through AI and all that stuff. And just my normal job. I'm writing another book. I've got 5 other books I want to write. So I've got countless things to do to make the world a better place. And sometimes I just have to go, right, I'm not doing any of those. I'm going to go and watch a Netflix show, and I still can feel a little guilt. And that's my protector going, but to feel good, you have to be doing something today. Mm-hmm. And the connector's just going, whatever, just relax, recharge. And sometimes those moments are when I have, you know, the biggest insights into what to do next. I just get this like, oh.
Yeah. Yeah. It was almost as if you described me, my perception of how life feels. And I was just smiling innerly and thinking maybe we should introduce our protectors to each other so they can go out to go shopping or whatever and enjoy a good film.
Well, actually, that's a really important insight, because often when we have debates with someone, you know, discussions, it's not really us discussing, it's our protector having a power, who's going to have the power. Yeah. And so in our relationships, that's actually a lot what happens is we have a fight with our partner or our mother or our business partner. And all what's really happening is 2 protectors are going, blah, 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 blah. So to get co-creation happening, you have to be in connector mode. Yes. And then you have this thing that David Bohm, the physicist, called dialoguing rather than discussion, which is discussive, it's percussive, it's ammunition. You have dialogue, which is and so what you've brought me into by having entered into this interview through your connector and having read the book and having had a connection with me before we started has brought us into a much more dialogical place where I'm having new thoughts, you're having new thoughts. I'm saying things I haven't just repeat. I'm not repeating my usual, my book is about this. Blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. Most interviewers want me to do because it's quick and easy and we're in a much more interesting place where we're going through, you know, and some people were like, well, where's the important bit of this video? And it's like, well, you might miss it because we're in a non-linear evolution of our thinking in the moment. Yeah. Yeah, and I so enjoy it, and but I want to connect to what you've said just before, and that is you spoke a little bit about your project, about the school, the books you have written, and you feel like you're going to write or might maybe have even started. So if somebody
who is watching this feels as inspired as I feel now and says, I would like to know more about Nick, about his work, how to connect with him, maybe if they can work with you in some way. So what are people's options, and where and how can they find you?
Great. So to get the most up-to-date thinking, then my 2 books are where I really is the best of me. And it's where I get to really share the bigger stuff, because usually when in meetings or workshops, you don't get to share everything. You're just a very small amount. So go to Amazon, go to your bookshop and order Spiritual Atheist, obviously. But my first book, Switch On, actually I can show it to you here. This is a more practical book. This is about, so if you like the theory and the philosophy of Spiritual Atheist, this turns that dual aspect theory into a practical, still philosophical, step-by-step understanding of how to transform yourself. And my third book will be a similar idea, but for leaders. So it's very focused on the leadership market. So that's the books. I have a website that has videos and workshops and free stuff and meditations and where to get hold of my more businessy stuff, keynotes, leadership programs. And that's switchonnow.com. And if you go to switchonnow.com/inspiration, that's where you can get a lot of free stuff and some really good stuff in there. Stuff I put a lot of energy into, both for the leadership side of things and for the personal side of things. I'll just say one thing. When I work with organizations, I don't use the S word, the spiritual word. I don't use the M word, the mystical word. I talk in this kind of create and connect, control and protect, and everyone loves it and they get it. So I'm a safe bet for organizational change, but I'm bringing absolutely connected, loving, purposeful, intuitive stuff into large organizations, and they want it. I mean, it's amazing. People want it. The CEO wants it. They just don't want new age packaging, and they don't want anything that's going to get people feeling that you're bringing religion in. And there's a really important distinguish between a church and state, and we can't have the church in our public decision making because it has a rule book. Whereas spiritual atheism is not a rule book. It's a set of principles for how to bring consciousness, cultivate consciousness, and bring it into our work, into our teams. So next week, I'm going off to Hong Kong for a big tech company to work with their senior team on collaborative leadership, which is exactly what one of the key areas for this work is. How do you get people to co-create, which means getting out of protector mode and finding your way into connection mode without talking about meditation or love. So I love those challenges. It's like, can I bring these people into these places, give them a tool set, and if they want to buy the book and go deep for themselves, great, go for it. But you don't need to come into a place of genuine co-creation or purpose or whatever it is.
Oh, yes. So good. And for everybody who is watching and listening, we'll have all important information about Nick right below this interview, so you will easily find him. And so before we close this beautiful conversation, I would like to ask you if there's anything important that you think we missed, that we haven't covered, that needs to be said right here and right now.
Just asking my connector. I don't think I have nothing. I think we genuinely came to some new understandings, and I really enjoyed bringing this work. And sometimes less is more. Sometimes we've done enough, and there's lots in what we've talked about today that are jumping off points into other philosophies, other thoughts, I'm really feeling a sense of harmony.
Me too. And I'm thanking you from my heart for this beautiful conversation and for you spending this time and being in this virtual space with me. I greatly, greatly appreciate it.
Me too. Really, really do.
So, goodbye, everybody. And always remember to take the driver's seat in this car called your life and create this lifetime to your taste. It's our pleasure here at Mind Gourmet to support you with our food for thought. Bye, Nick, and bye, everyone.
Bye.